On the morning of April 6, 1862, 45,000 Confederate soldiers under the command of General Johnston poured out of the nearby woods and struck a line of Union soldiers near the Tennessee River. They established a battle line at Sunken Road known as the Hornet's Nest. Repeated rebel attacks failed to carry the Hornet's Nest, but helped the Confederates. They surrounded the Union troops and captured, killed, and wounded most. During the first day attacks, General Johnston was wounded and was replaced with Beauregard. On April 7th, the Union's army outnumbered the Confederates. With a counterattack, the Union took over and the Confederates retired from the field. This two-day battle at Shiloh produced more than 23,000 casualties and was one of the bloodiest battles in American history at the time. This battle had a total of 110,053 soldiers. General Albert Sidney Johnston was born February 2, 1803, in Washington and died on April 6, 1862. Johnston, a Texas military officer, he served as a Confederate general during the Civil War. Johnston also fought in many other wars. Johnston had 45,000 Confederate soldiers in his army in the Battle of Shiloh. During the battle, Johnston's army pushed Grant's army north towards the Tennessee River with a series of bold charges. During a charge on the afternoon of April 6, he was wounded in the back of the knee. The bullet struck an artery and Johnston bled to death before he could receive medical attention. After Johnston died, General Beauregard took over as commanding officer. Grant's army started to gain reinforcements and with a counterattack securing a Union victory. Johnston remained the highest-ranking officer on either side to have been killed in action.
General Ulysses S. Grant was born on April 27, 1822, in Point Pleasant, Ohio. To his friends, he was known as Sam. He was a good captain during the Mexican War in 1846. When the Civil War began in 1861, he jumped at the chance to volunteer for military service in the Union Army. He became general in July 1861. The Confederate Army attacked the Union and the Battle of Shiloh began. At the beginning of the battle, many people wanted General Grant to be removed from command. Grant defeated Confederate armies and seized Vicksburg, giving Union the control of the Mississippi River and dividing the Confederacy in two. After the Confederate general died, Union took control and outnumbered the Confederate army. The Union won the Battle of Shiloh. General Ulysses S. Grant died on July 23, 1885.
Prisoners of the Civil War suffered the most cruelty of all. Over 425,000 soldiers became prisoners. About 56,000 prisoners died in prison from starvation, diseases, and simple neglection. There was different types of prisons. Some of them were just like our local county prison, and the prisoners were held in relative comfort. Then other prisons were crumbling warehouses of sprawling walled stockades where men by thousands suffered and died. There was 50 large prisons and camps divided evenly between the North and the South. But by July 1862, both sides captured so many prisoners that they made a formal agreement between the North and the South that they made a formula for trading prisoners in the war. Andersonville, or Camp Sumter, as it was known officially, held more prisoners at any given time than any Confederate military prison. The first prisoners of Andersonville were in late February 1864. More than 400 prisoners arrived each day.
Thousands of women served as volunteer nurses during the Civil War. At the beginning of the war, nurses were merely volunteers who showed up at military hospitals. But after the Battle of Bull Run, Clara Barton and Dorotha Dex organized a nursing corps to care for the wounded soldiers. Somewhere between 3,000 and 8,000 women volunteered their services as nurses throughout the Civil War. Few women nurses performed surgery. Nurses did a lot of tasks to help soldiers. For soldiers, women nurses took on the roles of mothers, daughters, or sisters. When Clara Barton was a little girl, she was full of adventure. Her older brother David taught her everything she had to know about life. Clara loved to nurse animals back to health and always put others' needs before her own. When David got very ill, Clara nursed him to health. Early in 1861, Barton went to Washington, D.C. When the Civil War broke out, she was one of the first volunteers to appear at the Washington Infirmary to care for wounded soldiers. In 1869, Clara Barton traveled to Geneva, Switzerland as a member of the International Red Cross. In 1880, the American Red Cross was established. Barton was the first president of the organization. Clara Barton died at the age of 91.
The music you hear in the background is from the Civil War. General Robert E. Lee, who once remarked that without music there would have been no army. Music passed the time, it comforted and entertained, it brought back memories of home and family. In camps and hospitals, they sang sentimental songs, comic songs, and patriotic numbers. During the first year of the war, an estimated 2,000 compositions were produced. By the end of the war, more music had been created, sung, and played out of all the other wars combined. Songs of the Civil War covered every aspect of the conflict and every feeling about it. The music was mostly played from a brass band and rhythms from drums. Around the campfire, a fiddler or banjo or guitarist would play, and a singer would sing the favorites of the era. Each side had their own patriotic songs.
Matthew Brady was the first person to take a picture of a U.S. president in office. Photography was only 10 years old, but Brady was already making history with it. Brady was known to take photos of famous people. He took pictures of the Civil War. Brady took many pictures of soldiers in the Civil War. He took pictures of them dead and in battle. Some soldiers visited Brady to have pictures of them taken.
The American Civil War is considered the first major conflict to be extensively photographed. For the first time in history, citizens on the home front could view the actual carnage of the faraway battlefield. Louis Jacques Monde de Coeur invented a method of etching lifelike pictures on a copper plate. The newest photography was called wet plate photography. Photography was born on an August day in 1839. I'm going to explain the wet plate process. First, coating was used to coat the plate glass in order to sensitize it to light. In a dark room, the plate was then immersed in silver nitrate in a light-tight container. It was then inserted into a camera.
Next, the cap on the camera was removed for 2 to 3 seconds, exposing it to light and imprinting the image on the plate. Replacing the cap, the photographer immediately took the plate. Still in the light-tight container to his darkroom, the photographer developed it in a solution of pyrogallic acid. After washing and drying the plate with water, the photographer coated it with varnish to protect the surface. This process created a plate glass negative. Once the plate glass negative was made, the image could finally be printed on paper and mounted.